What's going on, Nation, and welcome back to the channel for my Lifepath trailer analysis featuring snippets of the Street Kid, the Nomad, and the Corpo origin stories. This was obviously a part of Night City Wire episode 2 and started off the episode with a bang, so without further ado, let's get into the frame by frames. By the way, there were some repeated scenes from episode 1 of The Wire, so for those, check out the link in the pinned comment. Starting off the trailer, we have the Night City resident database. This is via an NCPD terminal, which might be the same ones we access for the scanner hustles in Night City, which are bounty hunts only accessible through these terminals. Only certified officers apparently can access and disable this device. We see the Street Kid Lifepath open up on Los Lobos Street, with Fixer Padre and his bodyguard approaching V. Fixers seem to keep these bodyguards for extra protection and to drive them around and run errands for them, and we know that Dexter Deshawn has a similar bodyguard named Oleg that does similar things. He has a cell phone in hand, which fixers in your local area will use to contact you, and Padre seems to be a Valentino based on his ring, his chain, and the V on his forehead. In a later scene, he also hands you this card with possibly his non-street name on it, Father Sebastian. There are some notable details in the background with our favorite ad for a MILF card, the Cyber Hub, which might be a market or convenience store to grab the latest cyberware, as well as a basketball hoop hinting at a potential side activity for when you're trying to kill some time in the city. In the next scene, we see Haywood and a hero of Haywood by the name of David Marino as some graffiti on the side of the building. The rough Spanish translation here is that he's a hero for defending his little sister against the Corpos, and it seems like he's a symbol of freedom and rebellion for Haywood. At 26 seconds in, we have the new combat cab taxi ad in the background. This is a taxi service which will take you through the most brutal of combat zones and will get you to your destination in one piece. We also see some more prominent Valentinos and Padre graffiti, and we know Haywood is Valentino's turf, which they share with the 6th Street gang. At 28 seconds in, we have Pepe, a bar owner from the Street Kid Lifepath, who you as a player are tasked to help wipe out at depthful. The papers in the back show a news story on an explosion in the Zeta Tech facility, as well as a protest in Night City with some NCPD riot gear shown off. There also seems to be a sports section with something about an MVP race as a headline. 30 seconds in, we have a group of Valentinos hanging out in the alleyways, smoking and drinking. The man on the right has an all-gold machete on him, and the shirtless guy on the sofa has a large Jesus tattoo. Now we know that from the world of Cyberpunk lorebook that religious-based braindance does exist, and that people have tried to recreate the suffering of Jesus in braindance form, which you can see posters for later on in the demo. If you remember a while back, there was also an ESRB rating summary which mentioned a possible crucifixion. Because the Valentinos seem to be at the very least moderately religious, these BDs might be extra appealing to them. CDPR is not really holding back on tough topics. This is their vision of the dark future, and they have gone full steam ahead with it. There's also a construction worker in the back, meaning that Night City is potentially going to have areas that are actively being developed like any real city would. In the next scene, we have the symbol for Santa Muerte, who is a female deity in Mexican folk Catholicism. She is the personification of death, but is associated with healing, protection, and safe delivery to the afterlife. This shot is a great example of the layers of the city, despite being an area that isn't overly crowded with skyscrapers like, say, City Center. There will still be dimension and verticality in some of the poorer areas in town. As it pans down, we see even more verticality, as well as some graffiti calling the NCPD SOBs. The guy in the bottom right is also rocking the retrofuturism with his 80s-esque shades. Moving into the next scene, we have the NCPD higher-up detective stints from the 25-minute B-roll, and again I'll mention that yes, there is a reason for this, but the developers are not mentioning why or how at the moment. If we zoom in on his firearm that he's picked up from Jackie, we see that it is from Tsunami, a higher-tier Japanese manufacturer who also makes the Nomad sniper rifle. 42 seconds in, we have a new pistol, which has a similar design to the weapon showcased in the Ripperdoc clinic in the first Night City Wire. The detail on the inside of the cars is quite nice, and you can see the options to have airflow towards your feet or your face. It's the little things like this that paint Night City as a more believable and cohesive picture. It looks like you're heading to the All Foods warehouse at night with Jackie to possibly take on the Maelstrom. At 43 seconds, we have the Street Kid V jumping out of the car and landing on a dumpster with the sign "No children or infants allowed in the trash bins," which we spotted in the first gig trailer, but honestly it needed a re-mention for those of you guys who missed it. Next we have the heist scene where you're attempting to steal the Arondite vehicle from Arasaka. In a recent Chinese demo, they showed the option to floor it, but a security system is inevitably triggered and the cops show up anyways. We know that the weapon being used by this officer is called the Alpha Baton, which was briefly shown in the weapons trailer. After V is beaten and dumped by the NCPD, he awakens looking up at the sky in a back alley, and you see the officer walking back to his police cruiser. Again, we see a newspaper on the ground. Print news still seems to be relevant in Night City, even with data terms being pretty pronounced in the lore. We know Cyberpunk 2077 will have street racing as a minigame, and the cinematic goes on to show a Fast and Furious-esque scene taking place in Vista del Rey. The black supercar closest to us is called the Avenger, with a further more luxurious one sporting the Villafort symbol, and there are some interesting clothing and equipment options here, including a biking helmet and what looks to be an Emperor-esque crown. We also see a Rayfield vehicle and a woman with a lime green jacket with the Tiger Claws logo on the back. The woman and the man leaning up against this vehicle have some high-tiered cyber optics, which looks very similar to the one this Arasaka bodyguard has later on in the trailer. While we're waiting in Padre's vehicle, we have a 6th Street gang member telling us to get out of Vista. If you guys remember this shot from Famitsu magazine, this is the same scene. He's wearing the armband typical of 6th Street members, but is more augmented than most of the ones that we've seen so far in screenshots and concept art. He has some unique eye implants and a gold cranial replacement, which I think looks really awesome. At 57 seconds into the Lifepath trailer, we have the updated look to the Sasquatch boss fight, which looks considerably more green than before. Notice how again this whole scene looks quite a bit grittier. You appear to only be using your fists as you get knocked over from the shockwave of her massive hammer. This shows off some new boots that you're wearing. Her veins are also glowing blue due to her steroid juice injector, giving Sasquatch increased capabilities and strength. The next scene shows the player sitting next to someone who feels a little bit threatened by your presence, as he pulls out yet again that same tsunami pistol we've seen before. We see a new drink known as Sham Paradise, which the player can possibly consume as a health regen similar to Night Cola soda. Hitting the 1 minute mark, we see V knocking on the door of the No-Tell Motel. It does look like you have options to have long or short fingernails, as Oleg opens the door for the player to enter in the in-game version of this scene from the 2019 CGI trailer. We also have a scene in what looks like the Lizzie's bar, presumably before we meet Judy for the braindance tutorial. Evelyn Parker is leading us into a room with some suggestive signs in the background. Evelyn is shown in a closer shot with some gold finger augmentations, which might be 2077's take on Rippers. Into the next scene we go, and we have this scenic shot of the Afterlife, a bar for solos and fixers. The fast travel tourist terminals are also shown here, which we have talked about a couple times in the past. In our final shot from the Street Kid section, we have this heavily augmented conversion next to an edge runner with yet another cyber optic, and the same tattoo as the man eating the burger from before. Moving into the Nomad section, it opens up with the Thornton off-road vehicle blasting across the Battlelands, showing the sprawling landscapes and blinding sun of the desert surrounding Night City. We catch a glimpse of the side of the vehicle and we see a horse sticker, possibly an homage to our buddy Roach from The Witcher. At 1:28, we have an Aldecaldo Nomad family sitting around a campfire, enjoying some tunes from the guitar. A ton of different clothing options are shown off here, notably both of these masks, as well as some mud boots. We know this isn't Aldecaldo's camp because of some of the clothing and the convoy in the background. We have an orbital air shuttle taking off in the background with some sky-high advertisements to each side. A Nomad town is shown here with an auto body shop and a gas station as being notable locations, as well as a signal tower in the background, which we catch V standing on top of later on in the trailer. He's using a Nakoda tracker, which is a lower tiered weapon manufacturer in Night City. Cars will have different variants, and you can bet Nomads will have some very unique types of existing cars to help them traverse the bumpy terrain, especially at night when there's little to no lighting. This older Nomad is unaugmented, and we see the Antelope logo for the Aldecaldos on the side of this off-road vehicle he's leaning up against. At 1:47, we see the Nomad clan or family called the Backers, whom V is abandoning in favor for the bright lights of Night City. The trailer moves to a shot at the border with the same Militech cruisers floating above as we've seen them in prior demos, as well as this Mackinac vehicle. At 1:55, I can already see the Judy Alvarez loyalists jumping ship for this new female Nomad, rocking some Yaiba racing gear as well as the Aldecaldos patch. Night City is in the distance in the background, again showing the scale of just how big the Badlands truly are. In the next scene, we have a ton of new sports bikes. Some of these seem more suited to off-roads, and some seem like they would be better suited for the city. Regardless, it is nice to see the designs of bikes past the Yaiba Kusanagi, which has been the only bike shown off thus far. At 2 minutes in, we have some Nomads who have what appear to be some engineering and crafting based augmentations working on this vehicle or tank. Nomads like to scavenge parts off of just about anything and are proficient mechanics. The Nomad women from before can be seen driving the Thornton vehicle, and again we see the handcrafted interiors of these vehicles, as well as a bigger gas station and some larger stores as we drive up to the border. There's an ad for Broseph beer before we pound back a couple in a Nomad bar. He'll Do Anything is on the screen in the back in a similar font to what's written on the mirrors in each life path. Again, these could be contextual clues to something much deeper. At the border, we get a close-up of this Nomad sporting a jacket with similar shoulder padding as what can be found on the Samurai jacket. His mirror shades look similar to an HTC Vive, and yet again we get to see some more diverse Nomad vehicles. As the shot expands out, we see another Nomad who looks like he could also be a Valentino based on his tattoos. Getting a better look at these cars, it seems like they do have Militech components on them. In our next shot, it seems like people have been confusing this iguana for an augmentation. This is the contraband that you will be smuggling into Night City in the Nomad prologue, since iguanas are on the verge of extinction. Next, we have this off-road racing sequence at dusk where we see Night City in the background. This is one of my favorite shots, and I'm hoping there will be a fair bit of content out in the Badlands for whenever we feel like we need a break from the glitz and glamour of the city. Moving into some of the combat, we have this classic Malorian pistol we've seen a ton of in the marketing so far. We are facing off against some Militech troopers who seem to have undergone a design change from the mushroom-headed soldiers from some of the recent screenshots. This could also, however, be a different tier of enemy within Militech's hierarchy. The pistol seems to have some sort of rapid fire mod, or we've increased some sort of skill which lets us shoot faster, and the trooper is using a pump action shotgun that can be seen in the Budget Arms ads as well as being used by the Animals gang. Melee with the pistol is a nice satisfying pistol whip, and this hand cannon is so powerful that you can blow off some heavily armored heads. Again, notice how close Night City is in the background of this shot. Moving on, we have the Corpo section of the trailer showing Arasaka Tower and what appears to be City Center. Entering the facility, we see some Corpos waiting for the elevator, with the one exiting rocking some Gorilla Fist augmentations, as well as a guy on the left violating multiple fashion laws with that horrendous getup. The inside of this building has a strictly neo-militaristic atmosphere, and in the lobby, we have propaganda films playing in the background. One such film shows an Arasaka bodyguard shielding the Emperor of Japan from an assassination. Moving into the boardrooms of Arasaka, we have what seems to be Susan Abernathy on the phone, the higher-up that you as Corpo V is tasked to oust. We have a big boardroom with some red lights illuminating pockets of the building, as well as a coffee machine. Arthur Jenkins is in the next scene, instructing you on how to undertake your counterintelligence job, and we also see what looks like monolithic skyscraper-esque buildings from Corpo Center in the background. V is shown throwing up from the stress as we see some potential anti-anxiety meds on the sink before a scene where he's reaching down for a mission briefing chip being provided by Jenkins. This is likely not the immortality chip or relic based on the size difference, and it opens up a message on your HUD similarly to the Maelstrom briefing given to you by Dexter Deshawn. This is looking to be a popular way to have missions laid out for you. Looking at Susan Abernathy's stats, we see that she is the Director of Special Operations and is currently 43 years old. She has a Trauma Team Platinum membership and has 4 Arasaka bodyguards with illegal cyberware, who we see apprehend V at the end of the Corpo Lifepath. Moving into some of the rooms in the Arasaka HQ, we have what looks like a net running room, illuminated by all red lighting. We have an employee with some arm augmentations, reminiscent of Tier 5 net running gear. We see some more locations inside this corporate tower before we're introduced to Yorinobu Arasaka. Former outcast of Arasaka, he swore allegiance to destroy Arasaka and formed a gang known as the Steel Dragons. He has since weaseled his way back into the corporation to potentially destroy it from the inside out, although him returning purely in search of power and due to corruption is equally possible. In yet another boardroom shot, we have a couple uniquely dressed characters. The man on the right most definitely has the Tier 5 net running augmentations, whilst the man on the left of the screen is rocking a gold jacket and hand augmentations which are similar to the ones that the sheriff in the Nomad Lifepath has. We see what could be Hanako Arasaka, whom Saburo had with his wife Michiko Arasaka when he was 80. This woman looks quite young still, so it could definitely be her or a new character. Saburo is seen in an Arasaka propaganda film or poster with his glass eye, aging features, and white hair. Now we have seen Saburo Arasaka in the 4 AM music trailer for Cyberpunk 2077, although he did look substantially younger. If this is a depiction of the net, maybe his conscious or avatar is suspended in the net somewhere, immortalizing him forever, which was one of the reasons why Arasaka wanted the Soul Killer technology in the first place. It's interesting how in the next shot they show an isolated Arasaka netrunner, as Jackie is still mentioning Saburo in the background. There definitely is something going on here, and I'd imagine the player will uncover this as he or she progresses in the story. We've talked about this cyber monk in the past and how they might vary from regular monks that we have seen in the past, and again we do see another shot of this guy in a meditative pose. We end the trailer in an Arasaka AV heading to the Lizzie's bar while sipping on some of the finest champagne Night City has to offer. I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video. I hope you found it informative, and for more Cyberpunk content just like this, check out the playlists and videos in the pinned comment, and drop a sub to stay up to date on everything and anything Cyberpunk 2077.